Abby, the conversation is actually on the Industrial Revolution itself. And now that we are getting into the fourth Industrial Revolution, there's quite a lot that is happening, especially with the Internet of Things. But joining us and to help us understand what this entire Industrial Revolution has been all about from way back in the 1700s, we are joined by Dawn Rowlands, who is the Chief Executive Officer for Sub-Saharan Africa's Dentsu Aegis Network. Thank you so much for joining us. A lot of people don't quite understand much about the Industrial Revolution. And from the first to the second, the third, and now we're getting into the fourth, which has a lot to do with cyber systems. We don't really have much information about it. How would you describe to the ordinary Kenyan or whoever is watching us what the Industrial Revolution is all about?
Well, we're very focused on the fourth industrial revolution, and that obviously follows on directly from, electrification and mass production of goods and services. The fourth industrial revolution is based on digital and automation and the massive effect that digital is going to have on every single business.
Right.
What we predict in the next 5 years is the top 100 companies in the world may cease to exist if they don't adapt and change. And the reason for this is that consumers that are obviously, buying these products are looking at things in a very, very different way. In terms of trust, digitization has provided consumers with peer-to-peer recommendations as opposed to trusting governments or so-called experts. So in terms of how consumers or the average person on the street is utilizing digital, because it's so democratized now, we are seeing massive, massive changes in how consumers view brands, and obviously, this affects business in a huge way.
All right. So we are seeing that we're getting into the fourth industrial revolution, but then again, coming from the third, which had a lot to do with automation, we've also seen that the gap between the two is really very close compared to the first two revolutions.
Yes.
We had the first one in 1764 and then the next one in 1860. So you can almost see that there's a century gap in between. But then again, when you look at the gap between the third and the fourth, it seems too rapid. And there are some African countries that haven't even caught up with the third revolution, and we're already getting into the fourth. So how do we make sure we maximize on this fourth revolution without having to miss out on the time difference between the last revolution and the one that's coming up?
Well, what I always tell people is, when you're starting out, there's something fantastic about that, because you can start as you mean to finish.
Yeah.
And that's why I said earlier, that these big companies are in such a serious predicament. Because changing legacy technology or legacy ways of thinking is much more difficult than adopting new ways of working.
Right.
So if you think about farming, tourism, and you think about the invention of a TripAdvisor, and you think about how that's democratized tourism, you can understand how quickly things will shift. So suddenly you have very small companies or very small countries who can actually compete on an open playing field. They're not having to make major investments in television commercials, et cetera, et cetera. They can utilize social media and scale their message very, very quickly. So digital provides, as I said, a level of democratization that we've never seen before.
Right. Are we ready for this? Are African countries in sub-Saharan Africa, ready for the fourth industrial revolution?
Absolutely. Africans are completely addicted to mobile technology, and this is growing at 3 or 4 times faster than anywhere else in the world, which gives us an amazing opportunity to have conversations with people directly.
Yeah.
This also allows us to analyze data in ways that we've never done before, because automation, certainly from a digital perspective, means that we can crunch huge amounts of data that in the past we haven't been able to. So from a healthcare perspective, an agricultural, environmental perspective, these things will have a major impact.
Right.
But I think the speed at which things are moving is faster than it's ever been before. So usually innovation cycles used to move in 50 to 100 years. They then moved down to 16 years. And if you think back to the invention of Twitter, that's 6 or 7 years ago, and we've already got iterations of that coming up. So the innovation cycle has probably moved down to 2 or 3 years right now.
As opposed to 100 years that we saw between the first and the second. Well, thank you so much. We do appreciate this. Dawn Rollins, who is the Chief Executive Officer, Sub-Saharan Africa Dentsu Aegis Network, that is here on the African continent. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Moving